Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Мы с вами начинаем беседовать на тему безопасных банковских приложений и пытаемся выяснить, кто, собственно, в борьбе победит. Либо преступное сообщество, либо разработчики платежных приложений вместе, совместно с их пользователями и теми, кто эти приложения эксплуатирует. Но для начала я хотел бы небольшое вступительное слово сказать о тех, почему, собственно говоря, вдруг Центральный банк обратил внимание на проблему, которая, в общем-то, по большому счету характерна не для большой государственной структуры, а для коммерческих банков, платежных агентов и тех, кто, собственно, работает с платежами. Первый момент достаточно серьезный. Все знаете, есть 161 ФЗ, закон о универсальной платежной системе, в рамках которой
where the central bank has received access to information about bank wires. Andrei Kurilo is in charge of that, and his name you may be aware of. Yes, there are some items that stand out of that regulation. The central bank cannot and should not be regulating the developers. What do we have on the other hand? The statistics the central bank has received is the experience that we have had in the commercial banks, and they mainly focus on clients. They attack clients OSs, and the appliances and the applications on the client side. The client sees something in the web browser, so it's on the client side, not on the bank side. When we understood that, we knew that we'd have to be more comprehensive in preventing the criminal steps. We need to address more the life cycle of the payment systems for the clients. Committee 122 for technical standardization of the Bank of Russia is doing a lot to provide the security on the life cycle stage of the application. Protection as such will not give you the desired results. We think it's key that the developers address the entire life cycle of the application, starting from its inception till its implementation and deactivation, where safe procedures must be maintained, safe encryption, penetration test capabilities, and so forth. Most of the banks, even the central bank in Russia, don't have such procedures arranged in a proper way. And we therefore try to create a culture of the safe programming, a safe utilization of the application, and I'd like to maintain that through the whole life cycle. How do we do it? The idea is quite simple. Having standardization recommendations and being able to regulate banking services market legally, we should impose requirements on the same or the safe use of the life cycle. So we'll be addressing the banks, and we'll be discussing this with the banks. Commercial banks just need to maintain safety by asking those who develop and provide them with software solutions. It looks easy and it sounds very simple, but in actual fact there are plenty of outstanding issues that are to be addressed. One of the tasks of our meeting today is try and think how we'll be able to address that and whether we have reasonable arguments in favor of such an approach and the arguments against. But applications should be safe and it should be addressed, and there is no doubt about that. Therefore, I'd like to give the first floor to the representatives of the Indian Department of Ernst & Young, Eric Anklesaria. You are the first to speak from Ernst & Young. Over to you.
Перевод у нас будет, да? Да. Желающие могут взять, поскольку пойдет речь на английском языке. Пожалуйста.
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon to all of you all, and a very welcome from India. Namaste. I think today's topic that I've been given to present is on secured SDLC for core banking solutions. Core banking has been very close to my heart, being involved in more than about 18 to 20 core banking implementations across the world on multiple platforms. So I come in more from a business side, the banking business side, and I will take you through a very short and a crisp presentation on what we've seen are the common fallacies in core banking when we talk about secured SDLC. I'll start my presentation with very simple basics about what is core banking and what are the advantages for a bank. Very simple, I'll just touch upon that, because many times people mistake core banking for a lot of other words. So I'll just explain to you what is exactly what we mean by core banking. We get down to what are the security statistics that one sees in terms of security vulnerabilities in core banking solutions. Then we get down into the need for application security and how does security, the important word is security, become a part and parcel of the complete SDLC process out there. And last but not least, we go down to how do we secure, what are the important things where we secure SDLC processes, and then open for question and answers for anything. So that will be the gist of today's presentation. You can reserve your questions either for the end or ask me as we are going through the presentation. I leave the floor completely to you. I think simple 3 or 4 words that I would like to say. Core banking is nothing else but an integrated transaction and operational processing system. It's as simple as that. Okay? A transaction and operational processing system. It's nothing beyond that, nothing less than that. Okay, so people talk about core banking in various different forms and words, but this is what it does. It stores, processes transactions, and does day-to-day business operations for the bank. That's it. It uses multiple interfaces like channels, etc. when we talk about ATM, internet banking, mobile, and all of that, to communicate with the core application. So that's what core banking is. So it provides real-time information for decision support and operational support for the bank. So that's in a nutshell what is core banking. I think let's look at some of the important statistics out here. ACS stands for the Advanced Security Center that Ernst & Young itself has, and we conduct a lot of research on security and vulnerability across the globe. Very, very important, some important statistics that I have captured for you. Over 51% of developers and security personnel who are into coding of applications as part of the SDLC processes have no formal training in security. You know, they are people who just know how to write lines and lines of code, but the word secured code out of that is missing. Okay, these are statistics which are conducted worldwide. Close to 41% have absolutely no collaboration between the development organization and the security organization. That means two different departments of a single unit have China walls in between them, and they do not talk to each other or collaborate between each other. What we have seen at the Ernst & Young Advanced Security Center when we did a global survey, we found that every application that's there, more than 93% of applications that we tested had more than at least one vulnerability that was detected out of it. So what we're trying to say is that at least we didn't find in our testing that there was any single application which we could say was completely secured. When we talk about 93%, that's a very, very high kind of an average that comes out. Let's go down to very simple basics about why we need security in a core banking application. Very simple. It stores customer information and data that is very vital to an organization. Any compromise of the customer information or transaction data can result into operational loss for the bank or reputational loss. It also compromises on information security regulatory guidelines for organizations that are set by regulators across the world, whether it be PCI DSS, whether it be ISO, whether it be COBIT. So you can also end up into a regulatory violation of any regulatory guidelines that are put across the globe. I think very, very simple. What I've tried to do is make it very simple. On the top, you'll see the SDLC process, which is the normal SDLC process. You know, the requirement gathering, design, development, functional testing, deployment. When you go through these life cycles, many a times the word secured or security is completely missing within these SDLC processes. You talk to any guy who does SDLC, they will talk about the topmost part of it. And then once the applications are completely ready and just going to be deployed into production environment, the audit departments, the audit teams spring into action, do some kind of security audit, vulnerability assessment testing, and that's how applications are deployed into live environments. But if you look at that, that's a completely flawed process. I think security needs to be imbibed into applications, into design, into coding, into development, and should start from business requirements itself. It's not that security needs to be the last aspect, it needs to come in right from the beginning. So let's talk about each of these areas in a little bit amount of detail as to what we mean by security in different terminologies across the SDLC processes. When we talk about security in business gathering or business requirement gathering, it essentially talks about basically the application risk profiling. What it really talks about is what are the critical business and technical risks that an application is going to be exposed to? How is this application going to be accessed? Is it over the internet? Is it a closed user group? How are we going to access the application? Is it going to store details and data that's going to be highly confidential and usable? And if compromised, can result into huge amount of losses for the bank or regulatory implications. The next thing is, the question that we need to ask is that, how is this application going to be accessed? You know, who are the users, how it's going to be accessed? And last but not the least, what are the possible use cases of the application? This aspect of security needs to be imbibed right from the stage when we gather business requirements. So, when I talked about the normal SDLC process about gathering business requirements, it would only be defining the requirements by business users. Security is never taken into consideration. And as a result, we miss answering a lot of these important questions which are necessary from a security standpoint. The next thing when we come on to is how do we design secure applications? The question is that normal SDLC process would talk about a business design, would talk about deposits, current accounts, loans, advances, etc. Often but not the least, we forget security design of applications. And ultimately what happens is banks end up spending millions of dollars after production in getting people like us or somebody else in doing multiple tests and finding out vulnerabilities, etc., which could have easily been built into the application when it was getting developed out there. So the first and foremost thing is developing a threat model. Means what are the implications, what are the necessary threats, etc., that my application is going to be exposed to when we talk about design considerations. Then something that we call as a secured architecture design. That's a framework which needs to be defined about how applications will be secured. So a framework which every organization needs to define. Either it can be on standards or it can be internal frameworks for security design of applications. And last but not least, developing test plans for security. How is it going to integrate with my overall business and functional testing of the applications? The next what we move on to, how do we develop secured applications? First and foremost is my development team really trained on security aspects of applications? Or are there people who are just good at development? Because these are two completely different aspects. One is writing good code, and one is writing good secured code, is completely separate. So the first and foremost thing to come out there is, are users really trained in aspects of security? How do they look at applications in a very secured manner? The next thing is, what are the standards that we're following for coding? Are we using any defined standards for coding which are there, out there? And last but not the least is, how are we ensuring that the code is security tested and reviewed as a part of the overall testing process of a bank when the application moves from the development to staging to acceptance to deployment out there? The other part, or the second last part, is basically the testing. Many a times we resonate the word testing when we talk about banking applications with functional testing, and security testing is given the last priority, which an audit department of a bank will come, do, certify the application, and it will be put onto production. But security testing has a very vital and a key role to play within the entire testing framework out there. So how are we integrating the secure testing process with the overall functional testing that's happening from a user perspective? So how are we testing the technical abilities of an application at the same time that a functional or a user testing is actually going on? How are we doing a regression testing of the security elements? It can be done using used cases, it can be done using tools, techniques, whatever. And last but not the least is, how are we doing a risk analysis of the application in terms of security? Please remember that I've always maintained that security and testing is not an afterward. It's right from the time that you are actually gathering requirements. So like there are functional testings which need to be done, there are very important security testings that need to be done to ensure that the SDLC process of an application life cycle is totally complete. I'll take you through my last slide because I've already been shown the time, that's last 5 minutes to go. I think the important part is that a lot of people talk about a lot of things. You know, PowerPoint presentations are very good. People like to make very flashy presentations. The important thing is not doing this thing once, or not somebody standing and talking about this, to you. It's about how you make this a part and parcel of your DNA of the organization. It's a process which needs to be imbibed into the organization's complete DNA cycle. Otherwise, security will always remain an aftertime, after an application gets deployed, etc. So, what I mean to say is that the word security or secured becomes a part and parcel of the SDLC process, and it has to be imbibed into the complete organizational process flows. It cannot be treated separately. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. You may do it for one application, and it will lose its rigor as far as you go down to the other parts. It's difficult, but not impossible to do that. So I think I would really end my presentation out here. If there are any questions, I do not understand Russian nor German. So if there are any questions, happy to take them onto it.
Ну что ж, коллеги, вопросы давайте, пожалуйста.
My name is Nikolai. I'm working at the bank. My question is, what could you advise those banks if they already have the working bank systems? Should they change these systems or do anything else?
I think changing of the systems is not as important as changing of your internal processes is concerned. You know, changing of a system is just like taking a very short step. It's a short-term goal. Changing of a system is not going to help you to mitigate any kind of a security risk. Any system that you take will have its own security risk that is concerned. It's about changing the way in which you deploy and look at systems. I think that's very important. It's about changing your processes, not short-term fixes like going and changing a system out there. So it's very, very important that people need to change the way that they look at SDLC processes within the organization, and not only make it functional in nature, but make it completely functional and technical in nature right from the start.
Еще вопросы? Неужели все было понятно?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Okay.
Микрофон.
Неожиданно. Спасибо. Что делать с используемыми библиотеками третьих лиц, которые однозначно код свой на проверку никогда не отдадут, но и он уже покупается готовым?
Okay. Generally, my experience has been that a lot of banks depend on third-party vendors as far as applications are concerned. There are very few banks in the world who have their own core banking systems or own applications out there. The important thing is that when you are dependent upon third-party service providers or vendors, as a bank, your quality assurance processes. Okay? Today, let me give you some of the examples, like when we were deploying systems, whether it be in Citibank, etc. The internal quality assurance processes of the bank mandated that organizations who would develop applications for them or maintain applications for them would follow laid down processes and guidelines that are defined by the bank on the bank's framework. And the bank at very regular intervals would idly do checks of these complete processes. The other important thing is that when applications are being developed by third-party organizations, the banks actually deploy quality assurance processes to ensure even code reviews are done simultaneously as part and parcel of the complete development processes. So it's not like, you leave the vendor out and do your internal things inside and the vendor develops an application and just comes in the bank and deploys it. You actually have security and audit teams working as a part of the vendor at his offices or at your location, wherever the development is actually taking place, side by side, throughout the complete process. So, nowadays nobody talks about security testing and application development and SDLC after deployment. It's always together when it's happening. So that's how vendor risk or third-party risk get mitigated, ideally.
Понятно. Ну что, коллеги, еще вопросы есть?
Tommy, are there any examples of a successful model of developing in the world? Well, you see, or is it just a concept, like you advise to the world to start doing this? Are there like some banks or probably developers in the world that do this?
Okay. As I really mentioned to you on my second last slide is that, many a times you'd see very good PowerPoint presentations talking about these things. It's ideally how much rigor an organization has and what its level of commitment is to this aspect that really matters. Let me give you an example. Lloyds TSB, which is one of the large banks in UK, and also RBS, because these are very close to what I have really worked, and that's why I can tell you about that. They have a their SDLC processes, which they define for any either be in-house application or custom developed applications, which are there for third-party vendors. They have security specialists and teams as a part of their complete development teams. For example, they would have two different people looking at code. A developer who develops that thing and a sample check. A certain amount of sample is taken out of that and checked by a separate security team for security testing, whether it be SQL injections or things of that sort. The important part out here that one should not miss is that this requires a certain amount of investment. And organizations who really worry and care about security because they're banking transactional applications would not mind investing upfront. It has been proved by statistics that the amount of investment that you put afterwards to make an application and the environment secure is maybe 3 to 5 times of that of what you would have put in when it's actually being designed. So I think it's all about how organizations look at security. Is it a compliance related thing for audit to check? Or is it really, really very important for me to make sure that my customers, both internal and external, are really very well protected? So that's the level of complexity that it can get into.
Okay, thank you. And some small question following this. So you say it's about investment. So is it really necessary to hire some new specialists, or is it possible to train probably your old coders to do that?
Okay. Now, important.
Пошла кулуарная дискуссия.
Ideally, an organization, what I believe, an organization needs to be self-sufficient with knowledge. Because application development is not going to be static. It's not that one time you're going to do this activity. Maybe for the first time, you can hire specialists. The most important thing is that how an organization engages with the specialist. Are you going to say that just because I have a specialist, here are my systems, go ahead and do the job, give me a report, I'm fine? Or you are actively going to involve your teams with the specialist to learn about how they're going about this complete process, so that at the end of the day, you can do a knowledge transfer and make yourself self-sufficient. if you do not make yourself self-sufficient, you know, you are always going to be dependent upon a third party, and that's not the right way organizations should behave, especially in these aspects. Because at the end of the day, a third party is still a third party. As a bank, you are directly responsible to a customer, not the other guy. Okay, so I think good to start off with, but
Ну что ж, коллеги, я думаю, пока вопросы мы закончим, но вот слушая вот эту дискуссию, презентацию,
I think we should finish the questions around. I was listening to this discussion, and obviously Eric is from India, the Indian division of Ernst & Young, and there are banks using Indian ABSs. Seems like I would like to ask a question whether everything done by the Indian companies meets the requirements described by Eric. Anyway, thank you very much. We'll carry on. I believe there are plenty of questions, serious questions about safety. What Eric was talking about is the thing which is different from a classic approach used by intelligence here in Russia, FSB for instance. They use different approach, the post-factum approach. That's why it makes the central bank be in an awkward position. On the one hand, we need to meet the requirements dictated by the state policies. On the other hand, we need to provide security for commercial banks for the real conditions. One of the requirements for the life cycle was using the competent opinion of the banks, and that's why I would like to make the next presentation delivered by Dmitry Kuznetsov from Positive Technologies. They are involved in this work. Of course, we do not work with just one company. We also use digital security company for that. But first of all, I would like to give the floor to Dmitry Kuznetsov. Thank you. Yes, you may take a different look at how to develop safe and secure applications for banking. You may take a look from the banking society, from the banks. On the other hand, you might want to take a look from the viewpoint of those who search for vulnerabilities. I will be speaking about those standpoint who search for vulnerabilities, trying to penetrate the applications. We create a safe, so to speak, safe application. But for a hacker and for the user, it may be safe in different ways. When we say the system is protected, we mean that, first of all, we are quite confident that we have implemented adequate protection measures against threats, and we know that these defense mechanisms do work, and they don't exist just on paper. The functions, security functions, as others, should be controlled by developer. Only if we combine these three factors, we can say that the system is properly protected. There are plenty of standards, recommendations, and white papers about how to develop these applications. If we try and analyze these documents and do the analysis, you won't be able to work it out easily. A lot of Russian experts are not used to using foreign white papers. because they have a completely different approach to what we are used, for instance. So if we would like to develop a different standard, the recommendations on the safe development, we need to take into account all our experience and create something compact, useful, and tailored to the Russian realities. You cannot just simply take and borrow international use cases without fine-tuning them and tailoring it to the local specifics. We analyze the security topic. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Естественно, у нас накапливается большая статистика о том, какие уязвимости.
We have accumulated quite a lot of statistics about the vulnerabilities and threats. Evgenia Putsilaevskaya will be speaking about that shortly. Most of the applications we have to analyze show the vulnerabilities that allow hackers to take full control over the application, do the unauthorized activities, bypassing the existing protection mechanisms. Would you please hold on a second? What was that? Unsafe programming or a wider functionality? No, it was just me breaking the clicker. It becomes possible because these systems either do not have adequate protection measures or they are rather ineffective. You close some paths of the threat penetration, but you are forgetting about other ways, other pathways through which this particular threat can penetrate, because you may attack the operating system or database management system and penetrate the application through them. So please remember that application is not working on its own. It's working as a part of a system which is integrated to the local environment, utilizing specific technologies. We have an application with a GUI interface, with a web interface, running on an operating system which could be shared by other applications. Data is stored in the database. If we are running this application in the cloud, we need to consider the virtualization solutions and so on and so forth. When we come up with a threat model, when we come up with threats analysis, we need to take a more comprehensive look at that, even if we are worried only about just one application. It's a standard approach. GOST 15408 stipulates that in an exact same way. Any security and safety requirement to the application automatically applies to other components of the environment, for virtualization, for instance, and so on and so forth. We need to more adequately evaluate the protection measures. For example, we implement a security function, like, for example, password authentication. Okay, we've implemented that. Is that protection measure adequate enough? To answer that question, we need to clearly see how the authentication through password could be breached, because there are plenty of ways to breach: brute force, hash tables, interception, of the password input and so on. In order to make sure that it's an adequate protection to the threat, we need to be aware of more standard ways of protecting our solution. Everything should be included in the mechanism, security mechanism. So technically, we would like to create a protected application. We need to include these details in the description. And this description cannot just contain general words. We cannot just simply fantasize on the security requirements. We need to be very exact. It's the way where we have to control what the developer is doing, how they are developing our application. Without our own IT experts or even hackers, we won't be able to come up with the exact protection requirements. Some documents stipulate, of course, a more standardized security requirements. They are the security requirements of the more high level, and you can use them and set them as templates, security templates. For instance, authentication, password authentication. To protect the password from brute forcing, it should be resistant, and you cannot use a very simple password, a very short one. Password complexity is one of the steps that identify the overall security status. And you can come up with such requirements easily, because most of them are well known. So if you would like to create a protected application, you may previously create a requirements list that you need to meet, creating the software in terms of security. Meeting these requirements, by meeting these requirements, you will be able to implement the security functions. This list may create different aspects for different components, for the web interface, for DBMS. It may look as a very sizable book, a thick book, but you can use it without actually, you can use it without the need to remember it. How do we evaluate the security functions quality? There are different opinions on that. The standard approach, regular scanning, if it's a penetration test, for instance. Some other people believe that the source code of the application should be available to those who will be looking for vulnerabilities in the source code. The black box analysis, the white box analysis. But in reality, there are many others. ROS Standard and its Committee 362 is currently developing a list of methods which analyzes the vulnerabilities. There are plenty of such methods. A web application tools list of analysis and others. A lot of work is done, given different results. So if we would like the developer to clearly understand how to test their application for vulnerabilities, we need to give them a more or less clear description of that process. In other words, we need to give the banks a tool by using which they'll be able to analyze the security of their applications, the banks should realize what's the exact scope of work that they need to embark on analyzing the application, the source code. So they need to use it as a guidebook, as a reference book to analyze the security protection, so that they can use it when setting a task to the pen tester, for instance.
Опять же, когда мы говорим, что рассматриваем пентест как
I think you should be speaking about the summary part already. We don't have too much time. For every component, it turns into a set of tests of which a pen tester is aware, should be aware. The banks should know what they include and involve. The life cycle is not just 5 cycles that we can see on the slides. It's the recurring cycle with lots of additional parts. You need to stipulate what exactly should be done at which particular step. If we come up with these recommendations, they should all be described in detail, from the inception stage till the decommissioning stage. Self-evaluation. Speaking in terms of a life cycle, we need to be able to evaluate it ourselves, how good we were in terms of safety. We need to evaluate it by using certain KPIs. Nothing new here. We use this information that is aware to everyone. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your presentation. But you haven't said yet about how do you react to the incidents, information security incidents. How are we supposed to react to the information security incidents? It seems like that any application will be running and used. Obviously, there will be some dangerous things happening to which you need to react. How do we exactly stipulate the reaction procedure? How do we react to breaches, for instance? Yeah, operations. When you use the system is when the incidents occur and when you identify the vulnerabilities. So there are plenty of measures involved: protection, evaluation, reaction to incidents. It's a cyclical process involved in lots of procedures. Let me add, security protection is a comprehensive matter. The life cycle part is just one of the components. It should be used as a more general system of reacting to the incidents. If we start to study the incident, we need to study the incident from logs, SKDs, and other things. So you were quite right. You cannot do it in an isolated way. You can do it in a more comprehensive way to manage the incidents. Plenty of incidents. Oh, the speaker is off the mic.
Хорошо.
Well, it's a good question. First of all, banks do that. To what extent? Is another question. is a standard philosophical debate. People say, how do I develop that? Why do I need to develop the security applications? It's easier for me to offset the damages and losses to the customers. Some banks choose that approach consciously, but they need to analyze the damages. It's up to the banks to decide what they choose. I would always be focusing on the actual convincing of the bank. They need to convince me that the measures they have taken is sufficient and safe enough. Does that answer your question? We were actually preparing the next speaker, the developer actually, with a very, very serious experience accumulated interacting with the customers. Those customers required a lot from security, and the developer resisted. Let's listen to that story first. And of course it's up to every bank to decide whether they need to use it or not. And thirdly, it's the amount of the resources that you're ready to spend, the amount of the investments that you're ready to run into for security purposes. I'm more than confident if people start asking you some questions, you just simply say, okay, we can do so, but it will cost you money. Please don't forget one very important thing. I was on the other side of the barricade, then I went to the bank. We forget about the speed. Internet banking is not about the money as such. Banks do have money. It's about speed. You see how many large, interesting financial startups have appeared. What kind of speed are you talking about? The speed of transaction or what? I mean, I'm talking about the speed of the development of the applications. It's the speed with which the applications are developed, which is key today. Remember that message when at the development stage you take into account security requirements. At the development stage you lift off lots and lots of problems at later stages. And we have the next speaker, Andrei Khokhlov from BSS. Hello, I'm Andrei Khokhlov, BSS, specializing in developing the remote banking applications. My colleagues have spoken a lot about the measures you need to take to minimize the outcomes. I will be speaking about the DBO's standpoint. The remote banking systems see a lot of fraud and stealing and thefts, unfortunately, but without such systems, a modern bank cannot survive. If banks' representatives would like us to participate and discuss the information security and announce that no one steals the money from them, it basically means that they are lying. They don't really want to disclose the actual sum of money which has been stolen from them through the use of the remote banking electronic systems. But of course I would not claim that banks don't actually want to pay for the costly security processes. Not at all. Leading banks do quite a lot, pay close attention to that, and the leading developers as well. Since recently they have been addressing the security issues properly. And I'll be speaking about that more in detail a little later. Unfortunately, today everyone's waiting. What's everyone waiting for? The banks are waiting for the amendments to be introduced to the law of the national payment systems. They are waiting for the central bank's orders. They are waiting for the responsibility to be described. The responsibility that they will bear for not meeting all those requirements. Before they have it, they won't be doing too much. And the developers are ready to provide technical tools. They're ready to recommend that, but not all of the banks are ready for that. And again, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to incur the costs?
Хотелось бы рассмотреть несколько, скажем так, крайностей в данном вопросе.
Let's consider a few extremes here.
Соотношение удобства и безопасности, как размышляют банки.
Convenience, safety, and security. If it's secure and safe, it's not convenient. If it's convenient to use, it's not secure or safe. It's not convenient to use, people will go to another bank. It's the matter of speed, convenience, and unfortunately it's a very rare case then you can do both. Safe and secure and convenient. On the other hand, there is another pair. Expensive, effective. If you buy more expensive tools, we can buy them, but if we do not implement them properly, we can expect bad results. The second mistake, we can implement all the possible ways to protect the client. Use all the state-of-the-art protection tools, and then clients try to minimize the inconvenience or leave that bank to another one where it's more convenient. Or thirdly, we can implement the world leading standard system of protection. Trusted environment, a popular thing. If you have trusted, it will cure all the fraud, but unfortunately there is no trusted environment. It exists just in theory. In theory it looks beautiful and attractive, but in practice it's hard to do. The trusted environment, there are plenty of ways to describe the trusted environment. Everyone has got their own take on that. Everyone's trying to create their own trusted environment. But there's no general view on that topic. So while everyone is pondering over what the trusted environment is all about, social engineering is developing. What's social engineering? You know what social engineering is all about, right? Is there a need from the market? The market need. As developers, we are ready to do that. Nothing prevents us from doing so, but are the users of the system ready? Banks, clients, are they ready to order the safe development? Are they ready to go through all of the positions of the life cycle completely, from inception, development, implementation, deployment, and decommissioning? Are they ready to incur the costs? And who's going to cover the costs? Who's going to pay for that? few words about good things, about what experts think about the remote banking systems. Ideally, all the products should be regularly studied for vulnerabilities. Our company believes previously people said that whether it makes sense that you use the existing stuff or outsource it. BSS, our company, has decided
собственной разработки, помимо повышения качества там, и так далее, внедрения методов безопасной разработки, которые, естественно, тоже
that this secure and safe development will require the involvement of those companies who specialize in studies of positive technologies, for instance. We regularly do these studies and PIM tests, and we also use other methods that previous speakers shared with us. And it's not only about the new versions of products, it's also about the versions of the products that have been released earlier and can be attacked and hacked by malicious users. As a developer, we're waiting for the regulators to understand in which direction we should be moving. The requirements for safety, the certification. If this certification exists, we'll be involved in that. And of course, we'll have to match those requirements, requirements to the developers and requirements to the banks, that we need to meet. Because today, when the bank is thinking about what they need to order, a very expensive system which will be developed for too long, or they order slightly more unsafe but quick to develop systems, sometimes they choose the second one, the second approach. And of course it may sound unbelievable, but would like to hear the voice of those who don't actually meet the requirements, so they share their views with us. What would be the most effective way to protect from malicious users? Is to create a more comprehensive multi-tier protection systems. The protection should be on the side of the customer. They should provide this protection for the banks. There should be different classes of systems. We would also like that state-of-the-art information security solutions are used here, and we constantly analyze the threats and interact in terms of the security with all the stakeholders, the experts, the banks, and the actual users. I'd like to say a few words about the analysis of the workplace. It's a popular item. In the end of the year, we'll have to wait for the amendments to be introduced to Law 161. The bank should pay back the money to the client if it had been stolen, but there's also an option of proving and providing evidence that it had been the client's fault that the money had been stolen from them. And the evidence could be provided by showing the experts analysis of the workplace of the client, whether they had the antivirus installed, whether they had patches installed to the operating systems. There are plenty of analysis criteria. You can learn about them more a little later if you like. If you analyze the working place, the computer of the client, you can use it to find evidence that it was the client to blame for losing the money or data. And make sure that they have access, safe access is provided. If they have an unsafe workplace with viruses, we do not provide them this access. But of course, we need to maintain a certain balance here, so that the clients will be running away from us to a more convenient bank. And as for the mobile devices, it should also be able to support mobile banking on different devices. That's all. Thank you very much.
Коллеги, есть вопросы? Есть? Да? Да.
Алексей Лихунов, скажите, вот есть
Why do you offer this as an extra option for which you have to pay extra money? Because this security and safety protection should be a natural component of a high-quality product. It should not be promoted as something extra.
А я вам поясню. Вот тут даже разработчика спрашивать не надо, он вам сейчас расскажет про много всего остального, но суть на самом деле одна. Разработка — это прежде всего деньги, которые разработчик тратит на разработчиков. Так?
The development involves the money that is spent on what's the demand is in the market. Regulations, for instance, if there are regulations or there are no regulations. Recently, we did not have such regulations, so what's the point of spending money on that? And the second thing, when the market starts creating such a demand, financial startups appear because this service is in high demand in the market, about mobility or mobility payments. They have become available to the general public, but the general public do not require security as a service. Security as a service is in high demand for larger banks where it may be very tangible for their balance. Sberbank, Promsvязьbank, Gazprom Bank start demanding more for safety, but it costs money. All the other ones don't actually need it, so it's either by regulations that is dictated by regulations or the market demand. There is no highly expressed market demand for that. As developers, when we do something, if the bank stipulates the conditions, they say, let's create something safe on all of the studies of the life cycle. We do that if the bank is ready to pay money for that. If the bank says, well, we don't have the money, we
Коробочный вариант, я вам сказал, он укладывается,
are
он
having a compromise decision.
когда сформирован потребность вечер пока нет.
А за чей счет?
There should be a need in the market.
Секунду, секунду. Вот ЦБ как раз и
What about the central bank? The central bank has certain requirements, the life cycle security requirements. We don't have too much time, so I think we should stop the discussion. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Olga Kochetkova. Olga will be speaking about the ATM security issues. ATM security. This is a problem that most of the ATM machines are Western made.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Ольга, я эксперт по делам анализа защищенности компании Positive Technologies, и хочу предложить вам поговорить сегодня кратко о безопасности, о проблемах безопасности банкоматов, терминалов платежных и способах их решения. По данным НАФИ, в 2012 году 83% держателей карт пользовались своими картами для снятия денег в банкоматах, и 32% использовали карты для оплаты услуг через банкоматы. Соответственно, ни для кого не секрет, что банкоматов становится все больше и больше, и проблемы существуют, причем, согласно официальной статистике, это только аппаратные проблемы, но на самом деле это далеко не так. Банкоматы подвержены и вирусным атакам, и программное обеспечение содержит какие-то уязвимости от специфических до обычных, присущих любым системам. И, соответственно, есть также проблема социальной инженерии или инсайда. Но к физическим проблемам можно отнести в первую очередь, наверное, скиммер. Это самое распространенное средство для получения дампов карточных данных, посредством которого сканируется дорожка и либо хранится на флеш-памяти, либо передается по радиоканалу. Решение на самом деле давно известно и простое. Это либо пассивный, либо активный антискимминг и джиттер. Пассивный заключается в особой конструкции слота внесения карты, когда невозможно установить накладку. Активный антискимминг создает подавляющее электромагнитное поле, которое блокирует работу скиммера. И функция джиттер, которая присуща практически всем современным банкоматам, но почему-то не всегда пользуется популярностью у банков, это внесение шума в считанные скиммером данные путем прерывистого, то есть прерывания скорости подачи карты. Соответственно, необходим контроль со стороны работников банка либо обслуживающей организации на предмет установки каких-то дополнительных несанкционированных накладок и обязательно оповещение клиента, например, путем размещения внешнего вида лицевой панели банкомата на экране. Также известна проблема траппинга, то есть мошеннического захвата карты. Здесь возможно много вариантов, но можно их разделить на две категории. Это либо установка внутрь каких-то гибких лент, которые при введении карты в картридер захватывают ее и не дают дальше двигаться. Либо это накладка, которая при возврате карты забирает ее и, соответственно, не возвращает клиенту. Клиент думает, что карта задержана, уходит, мошенник тут как тут забирает накладку, изымает вместе с картой и сразу же снимает все деньги. Опять же,
Takes all the money. You can resolve this problem by having a special design of a slot of the card reader. The card reader with a shutter, looking for the magnetic band.
И причем, так как это быстрые очень одноразовые накладки, здесь важно не просто приходить на банкомат и смотреть, как он выглядит, а
You'd always have to arrange the
видеонаблюдение, которое будет
video surveillance.
И, опять же, оповещение клиентов путем размещения внешнего вида картридера
and
лицевой панели банкомата на экране.
inform the customers.
Самая распространенная проблема по перехвату пин-кода – это камеры, которые направлены на клавиатуру.
Pin code inception, video camera,
которые
looking at the keyboard,
считывают введенный пин-код и потом хранят в
or a
памяти
faked
для последующего изъятия мошенниками и расшифровки.
keyboard
Камера
used for
может хорошо
intercepting
помочь своеобразный чехол,
the pin
который
code
прикрывает
input.
клавиатуру сверху и сбоку, чтобы было невозможно зафиксировать камеру, что вводится.
You can protect it
Соответственно, опять же, контроль со стороны персонала,
by
обучение
personnel,
клиентов.
by warning the clients.
Следующая проблема по
The next problem
считыванию пин-кодов – это считывание тепла остаточного склона клавиш и считывание тоновых сигналов с последующей расшифровкой.
is the
Здесь
tone
по
signals,
считыванию тепла можно рекомендовать металлические клавиатуры, потому что с них считать сложнее.
readings,
Лишние нажатия, которые клиент использует, допустим, при вводе суммы, то есть помимо ввода пин-кода, они тоже затрудняют расшифровку. И в случае с тоновыми сигналами это либо отключение сигналов, если это возможно, либо искусственное наложение шума для усложнения. Распространена также проблема подглядывания либо через плечо, либо в какие-то увеличительные приборы, либо в зеркала. То есть, опять же, для получения пин-кода. Причем это очень актуальная проблема практически на любых банкоматах, когда есть очередь и нет никакой зоны безопасности рядом с банкоматом. Соответственно, последующий стоящий клиент видит все, что происходит на экране, видит вводимый пин-код. Собственно говоря, этим и пользуются часто мошенники, либо стоя рядом, подсматривая, либо устанавливая какие-то зеркала, либо даже пользуясь тем, что банкомат установлен возле зеркал. Соответственно, здесь можно рекомендовать не устанавливать банкоматы рядом с зеркалами, то есть не допускать размещения каких-то отражающих поверхностей рядом с банкоматом. Предусмотреть зону безопасности, которая это не просто будет черта на полу, а какая-либо зона, отгороженная от следующих клиентов, то есть чтобы картхолдер мог спокойно снять либо внести свои деньги, не беспокоиться о том, что его данные будут скомпрометированы. И некоторые разработчики предлагают систему обзор за спиной. То есть в верхней части на лицевой панели банкомата установлена камера, и на лицевой поверхности банкомата в поле зрения клиента устанавливается мини-монитор, на который транслируется изображение с этой камеры. Соответственно, клиент, когда обслуживается на банкомате, видит то, что происходит у него за спиной. В последнее время, вот буквально несколько недель назад, мошенники с
thieves with cash trappings activated.
Они изымают деньги и с последующим реверсом
They do the reversals
происходит реверсал, возврат на карту, и
of
можно будет
the sold amounts back to card, and they would be able to
Если в двух словах сказать схему,
use this approach constantly. It's a simple method,
вместе с тем,
but at the same time,
но простой и находчивый.
it turned out to be a very smart one.
Мошенник снимает по карте маленькую сумму, и в тот момент, когда шаттер открыт,
Withdraw a small sum of money, and while the shutter is open, they insert the flock into the shutter. The shutter closes down, and they would ask for a bigger sum.
этого устройства, она блокируется, то есть при этом он блокирует шаттер, чтобы он не
The
открылся.
shutter is blocked.
Шаттер не открылся, деньги не были предъявлены клиенту.
Seems like that the money has not been produced to the customer and tries to reject it. But the money does not go into eject section. The error is indicated. The ATM goes into out of service. Money goes back to the card, and the thief just breaks into the shutter, takes the money, and goes to another one. Not all of the ATM machines are exposed to that, yet at the same time should be able to say that the shutter modules have been upgraded. So what would I recommend? to do urgently, to upgrade all the ATMs immediately, otherwise you would incur huge costs. Just imagine Sberbank's network of ATMs. So imagine all the grannies who immediately rushed in and started making withdrawals. What you need to do is just to update it. What if Granny comes up with her card and there is no money, so probably she'll be leaving the ATM. There is another thing which is not new, and we've known it for 5 or 8 years. Some safes some safes are vulnerability, so you just cut a section, cut a hole, and break into the lock, so you won't be able to do anything else. You just open the door and take all the money. To do that, we have created handmade solutions that protects the safe. It won't allow you to install it, so you'll have to update the safe. And there is another problem that the banks tend to forget. Similar locks types on different ATMs. For instance, they have all the locks of the same model, and you use the same key to open all the ATMs. Get to the ATM part. So the solution is obvious. Just replace the locks for the more unique ones. I'm not going to mention Sberbank. There is a small number of ATMs. A large number of banks have been neglecting elementary surveillance systems, GPS surveillance. They're extremely important, crucial. And with the use of the cameras, you'll be able to consider some of the dubious situations. It's an old problem. A lot of them know where the camera is located. And the camera is recording everything into a buffer. And then it records everything onto a hard drive. And 5 to 10 minutes afterwards. So if they close the camera, there's no recording going on. All they'll just be blinding the camera with a torch or flashlight. We might recommend installing some hidden candid cameras so that you can see who is located in the vicinity of the ATM machine. And the alarm is mandatory. It's the first thing you need to do with the ATM to prevent the break-in. GPS beacons may help you as well if ATMs are stolen, because sometimes the ATMs are stolen and taken away, and GPS beacons can show their location. The software part is a completely different part. What's inside? Operating system, Windows XP, NT, drivers, applied software, and Internet Explorer is used as a renderer, or any other similar browser.
все
XML and
уязвимости,
JavaScript
которые справедливы для этих средств или систем, они будут справедливы и для прикладного
will
программного
apply
обеспечения.
here.
Очень большая проблема — это неправильное использование средств дальнего доступа.
The misuse of the remote access tools
Любые какие-то средства, когда банкомат без
is a
присмотра,
bad mistake.
соответственно, клиент, либо он может, какой-то мошенник, проходя мимо, может увидеть, что происходит на банкомате, либо
They will see what is happening,
просто перехватить управление. Соответственно,
get control of the ATM machine,
изъять данные, либо просто что-то увидеть.
steal some data.
Здесь, соответственно, нужно очень тщательно подбирать, проверять,
You have to be very careful testing the remote
невозможно обойтись без них.
management tools if you cannot do without
Еще
them.
одна проблема, которую вы можете видеть на любом терминале или банкомате, это окна, которые
Another problem.
приложений. Причем окна
Pop-up
самые разнообразные,
windows,
включая даже те, которые
different
сообщают о том,
pop-up
что
windows.
лицензионная версия Windows или о том, что закончился
Windows messages, for instance.
Соответственно, из большинства этих окон на тачскринах
Most of these pop-up windows
можно выйти в операционную систему и скопировать
can allow you
всё, что угодно.
to copy everything from the operating systems, any data.
Вирусы на банкоматах также встречаются, причем зачастую все эти атаки, они замалчиваются
Viruses are common on ATM
и не
machines.
доводятся до сведения каких-то руководящих постов, либо служб безопасности. И появляются на банкомате обычно двумя способами. То есть классический
There are normally two ways of getting the viruses, either through the network or the USB ports.
Использование антивирусов,
Antivirus uses recommended or other data protection tools or USB ports blocking and the limited support for USB drives.
Есть также проблема по использованию криптоключей. То есть, как известно, криптоключи, которые вводятся в
Cryptographic
клавиатуру,
tools.
информация, они должны храниться только там.
Cryptographic tools and
Не
keys
должна быть возможность их компрометация.
should not be compromised. Yet there are some developers that allow the maintenance of cryptographic tools remotely or through ordinary keyboard, which could be intercepted. Or use a sniffer, for instance. Need to arrange the key protection in the applied software and run some prevention measures. Prevention measures need to be implemented at a higher bank level. Attacks can be arranged and organized, and these are the vulnerabilities that overflow the buffer, HTML, XML. There are plenty of attacks that can be conducted. Don't have too much time to talk about all of them.
Существует также проблема до сих пор, даже у тех банков, которые имеют PCI сертификаты на
Banks with the PCI certificates have an unmasked card numbers and the free access to the registry files. I think all of you must have read the news and know what's happening. You need to try and eradicate it at the developers level.
Борьбу с такими проблемами еще на этапе разработки. Существует масса best practices, которые
There are plenty of
безопасные
best practices
минимальные требования к безопасности программного обеспечения.
providing recommendations to the safety of the software. You can get that from the association of the ATM producers, ATM manufacturers. You can use it and apply it.
По этой проблеме и да, я буквально секунду еще. К сожалению, нельзя все осмотреть, и за такой короткий промежуток времени.
Unfortunately, we don't have too much time
И, конечно, можно рекомендовать и безопасные
to talk about that all.
настройки, но и главное,
Safe programming are recommended here, of course, but what you have to do is to offer security audits. Our company does them to minimize the compromising the data in ATM machines. Thank you very much.
Я пользуюсь, у нас со временем совсем плохо. Вот, пользуюсь правом модератора, я, наверное, вопросы отменю, просто небольшой комментарий как бы дам. Ну, если вот на две части разделить, первая часть у меня вызвала в памяти анекдот. Знаете, как хакнуть банкомат? Надо взять кувалду и ноутбук. Вопрос, зачем ноутбук? Ну, какой же ты хакер без ноутбука, да? Вот, раз мы на такой конференции. А второе, на самом деле проблема, почему мы говорим о обеспечении безопасности на всех этапах жизненного цикла. Если вы обратили внимание, практически все вопросы во второй части выступления были связаны именно с тем, что на какой-то из стадий жизненного цикла, неважно эксплуатация или разработка, были допущены классические ошибки, которые в принципе можно было бы избежать, если бы были учтены требования безопасности. Так, спасибо большое.
Да, совершенно верно. Это как раз справедливо по поводу предыдущего оратора, который тоже затрагивалась безопасная разработка. Спасибо.
Абсолютно. Спасибо большое. Следующее выступление. Евгения Поцелуевская нам сегодня обещала поведать про статистику уязвимости ДБО. Значит, ну, пока она выходит, опять же, короткий комментарий. ЦБ собирает определенную статистику по инцидентам, в том числе и связанную с переводом денежных средств. Обзор, который ЦБ делает, публикует его на своем сайте, можете его посмотреть. Пожалуйста, заодно будет повод сравнить с тем, что позитив имеет и, соответственно, ЦБ.
Добрый день, коллеги, спасибо. Меня зовут Евгения, я так же, как Ольга, работаю в отделе анализа защищенности. Ну вот, как уже было сказано, сегодня я буду рассказывать не о методах взлома систем ДБО, даже не о методах защиты, а, собственно, о той статистике, которая у нас получилась за наши последние 2 года.
A few words about the statistics about the protection of the systems. I think this information may be very interesting for you. When you prepare the documentation every day, it seems like that you already know what the situation may look like.
И в зависимости от того, какой элемент слона они трогают, они по-разному себе представляют, что такое слон. И здесь оказалось точно так же, и оказывается, если отойти чуть подальше и посмотреть на все эти результаты в целом, можно увидеть много всего интересного. Можно увидеть слона, какой он есть на самом деле. Так, у меня тоже не работает вот эта штучка.
Сейчас перейдут на ручной режим.
Спасибо. Итак, мы рассматривали последние наши работы за последние 2 года.
Over the last 2 years, we have been analyzing the system's vulnerabilities, different purpose systems, large-scale bank systems. You can see the approximate number of the users, after it was put in production. may illustrate the situation in large banks.
Мобильные системы дистанционного банковского обслуживания, потому что они все-таки имеют немножко свою специфику. Также исключили системы, которые представляются, коробочные системы, которые предоставляются вендорами в случае, если у нас эта система уже профигурировала в другой статистике, для того, чтобы исключить дублирование искусственное. И мы не включали сюда результаты повторного анализа защищенности, которые часто проводятся для того, чтобы проверить, что уязвимости были корректно устранены. Естественно, после проверки, после устранения уязвимости, часто ситуация оказывалась гораздо лучше, чем то, что мы сейчас увидим. Итак, что мы в результате имеем? Не туда. Отлично. В итоге получилось, что большая часть уязвимостей, они имеют среднюю и низкую степень риска, уязвимостей критичных оказалось не так много, и даже если посмотреть на наиболее распространенные уязвимости, в принципе, примерно такие же результаты уже озвучивались на банковской конференции в Магнитогорске. У нас самые распространенные уязвимости, они имеют средний и низкий уровень критичности, они относятся классически, это слабая парольная политика, когда у нас банк о каких-то требованиях к паролям вспоминает, а о каких-то забывает при указании парольной политики для клиентов системы ДБО. Недостаточная защита от брутфорса очень распространена, очень часто, где не используется капча, это позволяет подбирать пароли, и часто можно идентифицировать приложение. То есть, на первый взгляд, кажется, что ничего такого особо страшного нет, но вот этот слайд, в принципе, уже показывал Дмитрий. По факту комбинация этих уязвимостей и наличие каких-то критичных уязвимостей, которые индивидуальны для различных банков, приводит к тому, что можно реализовать различные весьма серьезные угрозы в отношении систем дистанционного банковского обслуживания. То есть, как минимум, это какие-то уязвимости среднего уровня риска, например, когда возможно обходить авторизацию, проводить транзакции без ввода одноразового пароля на уровне авторизованного пользователя, и заканчивая полным контролем над всей системой, начиная от приложений, не только полностью вывести все деньги из системы, но и контролировать атаку дальше другим банкам. Что здесь хочется отметить, что если прикинуть примерно количество денег, которые хранятся,
the amount of money which is stored in these systems,
мы видели выше, такой вот максимальный ущерб,
the maximum damage that we have tried to assess. If all these red vulnerabilities had been implemented completely, if the banks had not prevented those, they would have lost approximately 21 billion rubles for a bank. For legal entities, up to 50 billion. We checked larger banks for the scale. But we hope in practice it will never happen. Well, ideally, you should not just react to the incidents, you need to prevent them. We have problems with the protection mechanisms, authentication, encryption, storing of the non-encrypted files, settings issues.
Имеют самую маленькую долю, но стоит отметить, что, как правило, когда мы проводим анализ защищенности систем дистанционного банковского обслуживания, мы сознательно не фокусируемся на этой проблеме, потому что, как правило, мы сфокусированы на том, чтобы проанализировать непосредственно систему. Поэтому, когда мы видим, что есть идентифицировано приложение, которое имеет устаревшую версию, мы говорим об этом банку, но дальше до уровня самих уязвимостей и к эксплуатации, к договоренности с банком уже редко доходим, а стараемся сфокусироваться именно на других типах уязвимости, поэтому, возможно, в этой части все гораздо хуже. Если посмотреть по тому, как вот эти типы уязвимостей распространены среди банков, то можно увидеть, что Это у нас процент показан, сколько рассмотренных систем имеют уязвимости соответствующего уровня риска данного типа. То есть у нас, например, недостатки механизмов защиты встречаются во всех системах. Во всех системах так или иначе у нас есть проблемы либо на уровне аутентификации, либо на уровне авторизации. И в 27% систем содержатся критичные проблемы данного типа. Например, существует веб-интерфейс для администрирования, который доступен рядовым пользователям системы ДБО. Ну, понятно, что можно с этим сделать. Уязвимости кода приложения, их, получается, существует 18% систем, в которых они не были обнаружены, это уже неплохо. Ну и вот что касается устаревших версий программного обеспечения, тут, как я уже говорила, во многих случаях они просто не рассматривались. И к самому интересному, и что у нас получилось, какая общая картинка. Я думаю, многие банки задаются вопросом при выборе системы ДБО, какую систему выбрать, разрабатывать своими какими-то силами, нанимать каких-то новых разработчиков или купить какое-то коробочное решение от известного вендора, который уже...
Be able to buy a box version from the vendor. It was quite surprising even for us. Seems like the famous vendors systems have far more critical vulnerabilities. There are plenty more of those. We're not talking about any system provided by the vendors is much worse than the homegrown system. It's not true. Developers have accumulated quite a lot of experience here, but the point here is that these systems are all-rounders. They are to be used in a large number of banks. Only in the vendor systems we found critical vulnerabilities on the code level.
Что здесь можно посоветовать? Не значит, что надо...
What would be our recommendation? Of course, it does not necessarily mean that we need to develop control the process and analyze the vulnerabilities, and if the process of vulnerabilities correction is a slow one in a logic.
Обязательно использовать, поскольку проблема на уровне кода веб-приложения, использовать Web Application Firewall, который может временно эту проблему заблокировать. И еще один интересный результат. Это оказалось, что у нас продуктивные системы, как правило, были на стадии ввода в эксплуатацию. И оказывается, что продуктивные системы гораздо более уязвимы. Тут на картинке видно. Я думаю, здесь это связано с тем, что
imposed to vulnerabilities than the systems in production.
Принимали работу у разработчика, у подрядчика. После этого, когда система уже находится на стадии эксплуатации, забывают о том, что нужно по-прежнему следить, чтобы администраторы ее корректно конфигурировали, о том, чтобы уязвимости в коде регулярно устранялись. Ну и то есть вот на стадии эксплуатации о таких вещах забывают. Ну и, собственно, вывод, что не стоит переоценивать именитых разработчиков, даже если они хорошо известны на рынке. Как раз большинство продуктивных систем, они были предоставлены вендорами. То есть можно сказать, что банки, они априори доверяют известным разработчикам. Вот. Покупать такие системы стоит, но обязательно нужно...
And should not underestimate what is happening in the operation stage. Remember that the security is a process which is changing, and some vulnerabilities may result in a very bad result. Thank you.
Я опять пользуюсь правами модератора и со временем проблемы. Я
вопросы не буду задавать, но комментарий очень простой. На самом деле, последняя статистика, которая приводилась, да, последние два графика, очень хорошо отражает тенденцию, которая реально существует в банковской системе. И вполне понятно, почему. Собственно, у профессиональных разработчиков, у компаний, которые пишут софт, заказов гораздо больше и внимания к модулям гораздо меньше. Там, где идет написание собственного софта, как правило, это точечная разработка вполне конкретным заданием. И унаследованность механизмов защиты обычно соблюдается. И поэтому, в общем, тенденции понятны. Ну, спасибо большое за
Можно еще небольшой комментарий. В системах собственной разработки есть такой минус, что там чаще встречаются проблемы с механизмом защиты.
The homegrown systems very often have problems with the protection mechanism. Okay, let's not get into these details. So we're finishing this part with the discussion. We have listened to everyone, with the exception of banks.
Все работает? Здорово. Коллеги, меня зовут Алексей Липунов. Я сегодня выступаю как независимый эксперт от банковского сообщества. Ну, ситуация простая. Давайте просто вернемся к основной теме нашей сегодняшней встречи. Это, в общем-то, некое понимание, кто победит. Там, пресловутые хакеры или там, некое банковское сообщество в борьбе за деньги. Ну, давайте рассмотрим обычную простую задачу. Это, не знаю, отправка СМС клиентам, которую там все банки проводят. Как правило, СМС-ки все рождаются в недрах автоматизированной банковской системы, которая суть там всегда базируется на какой-то СУБД. Как правило, где-то есть некий прикладной сервер, который осуществляет интерфейс со внешним миром и с пользователем самого банка. Ну, задача нарисована на рисунке. Ну, некая, так, почему показал такой смайлик, такой посредственный, некая приемлемая схема реализации данной задачи. Есть там банковское центральное ядро, из которого там прикладной сервер берет информацию, соответственно, через межсетевой экран информация уходит посредством защищенного, естественно, соединения правильному СМС-провайдеру. И дальше СМС-ки улетают, соответственно, клиентам. Причем все логи они формируются на всех этапах движения информации и собираются с централизованной системой сбора информации. Ну, некая приемлемая схема. Как происходит на самом деле? В банках, которые используют готовые автоматизированные банковские системы,
Automated banking systems like Biosoft, for instance, and other ones, other famous ones, normally they don't have the qualified developers. And when there is a sudden need to do something, to write code, to create an application, you need to implement it quite quickly. Normally, you do it through a server, an ancient server, rather. Someone, even an economist, would create an applied software using Delphi, Visual Basic, or whatever. I'm not talking about a data encryption when you move this data from host to host. There is no brand malware protection or firewall protection when you send the messages to the SMS provider. And they choose the cheapest SMS provider ever. The point here is that the terminal application, which was developed urgently by someone, is running with the admin's credentials, the one who created that software. When this admin fires or gets fired, they should be changing their credentials, but someone is afraid to do that, and they keep on running this system for ages. As a normal, typical implementation scheme, the DBMS, firewall, DMZ, a host containing DSS, BFeed, any software for remote banking. Right here you also need to encrypt the data. This is the first requirement addressed by the auditors. So auditors would constantly monitor whether they do it or not. It's never been done. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never actually seen the actual server protection, which is in the same DMZ as the other hosts. Normally system administrators segregate one zone and they put the remote banking systems there and the ATM interface in there. All the systems are put into the same zone. Of course, somewhere there is a vulnerability which hackers can make good use of. I've seldom seen protection of the equipment using the protection of the remote access systems from DOS attacks or DDoS attacks. You may want to use the third-party solutions against DDoS attacks, and sometimes they do that, but the actual hosts are not protected from DDoS attacks or DOS attacks. If there is an attack, if there is massive traffic generated, host is put to another place and it's not protected for the time being, and the system is still vulnerable. So it's monkey's business anyway. The same applies to the host which is located in the same DMZ. It may breach the system locally. There was a task to create software to send messages. Intelligent people work in banks, but sometimes the conditions are not too suitable. Sometimes in banks you don't have the complete set of experts. So the software is sometimes developed not by professional developers, but by economists, by those who just are capable of writing a software, but not a skilled professional. You use a file, you close the session, leave a log record, and wait again. When we change the two first blocks, wait for the data. That developer that created that software didn't know much about network protocols. They don't know much about the firewall problems, about provider issues and some other networking problems. People don't know much about networking part. What actually happens is that in the morning someone launches this program, then it works for a couple of hours, then something is wrong with the networking and it hangs and it's dead, and they would have to restart this program again and again and again. And it's actually an example from real life. The only big problem is the problem of integration. We reflect it here. when we develop every application, turns out that the developers share the responsibility with someone else. So somebody else is responsible for that. Every software had been installed a long time ago in the prehistoric days of pre-information security era. I remember lots of problems with heterogeneity, which required the complete disassemblement of the infrastructure. So we have problems with staff turnover, bureaucracy, obsolete software, heterogeneous environment. The banks that started work in the 1990s don't necessarily use the state-of-the-art software. Most of the banks use ancient, obsolete softwares, DOS, knitware. You can very often see slides what information security starts from. I would like to show you where the information security actually stops. If there's no control of connecting, of monitoring the external device's connection, there is no protection. You may throw away the DLP systems if you can connect everything to the network. I've seen lots of issues with admins who believe that if there is a mail antivirus installed, then all of the emails are crystal clear. I would have to prove them otherwise by sending the test messages showing that we still get infected files getting into the email boxes, which was kind of surprising for some of the admins. Lack of trainings for the so-called ethical hacking. What's ethical hacking? You may learn about it. The problem is simple. When people graduate the universities, they don't know much about security or programming or system administration. We understand that people need trainings and people are not instructed on what they can do with the code or what they can do with settings or what they can do with the system. Hackers and banks. I believe that serious business is done in the A4 format, on paper, but not electronically. Now is the time for international criminal groups and terrorists. Plastic card retail has allowed to do the electronic bank transfers easily, to buy weapons, to send to the heated regions, and so on. All the rebels belong in jail. What does that cube stand for? Well, if hackers steal some money from a bank, no one will ever notice that. But I think if there are some encryptions of the investigation in terms of the terrorist activities are concerned, they will be found and they will be put in jail. So don't be caught, don't get caught. Imagine someone has caught a person who has violated the copyright of a musical producer, a production company, and then in 10 days there is information about the transaction from a neighboring bank. And the investigator calls the policeman saying that there is a hacker living in the district, and this poor bloke who was only guilty of downloading some unauthorized files is becoming a suspect of a more dangerous criminal activity, right? So I think these financial bites from hackers are useful, because hackers help and keep banks in shape so that they are always on the alert and address the information security in a better way.
Подводя итог, время у нас уже не осталось, что хотел бы сказать. Вот небольшой комментарий в отношении того, что если что-то случится на международном уровне, то обязательно
we will find the criminals in any way. I remember meeting people from our American colleagues, people from America started complaining about their police. So the money gets stolen and the police doesn't seem to do much. I listened to them, and obviously it seems like we have similar problems with criminal activities are enhanced, and police is not doing much, and the banks are suffering. Anyway, it proves us once again we will have to be changing our approach, and the central bank will be doing so. Thank you very much, all of you who have been involved into this long 2-hour session. If you have any outstanding questions, please come up with them later. Thank you very much. That's all.